Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Agascles Davis from Gearworks.com and the E2KG Network channel on YouTube, back with another episode of It's Another Thing, episode number 5. Here with me, as always, because It's Another Thing is our entertainment series podcast on the E2KG Network. Here with me, as always, is Mr. Dave Pecci. How are you doing, Dave? Long time no
Good, yes.
see.
So we've had a bit of a break, and now we're back. And hopefully, I think we're trying to cover kind of some of the more less known Marvel superhero shows. Maybe down the road, some other stuff. So we are going to be covering Cloak and Dagger, which I think is pretty good right now. I think it ranks with the other Netflix shows. Um, but it's different. We'll get into that more later. So this episode will be covering episodes 1 and 2, which are called First Light and Suicide Sprint. And Sunday, we are planning to cover episodes 3 and 4, which are called Stained Glass and Call Response. Um, so I'm looking forward to it. I kind of like that. I think it'd be a good idea if Marvel started exploring more other characters and created new characters, because a lot of what Marvel, I think, is focused on is the Avengers and characters around the Avengers, and I think it's good that we bring in some highly unpopular or some new characters into the Marvel Universe, and that it's not always focused on the Iron Mans and the Captain Americas. Um, and I like that. I also like the fact that Cloak and Dagger was they made them younger. Just want to throw that out there because I think it's a good marketing strategy. I think I felt, at least for me, because they're kind of high school age, but I felt like it was a little bit more. I don't know, just a little bit more fun that they were high school age superheroes than the usual. I think The Gifted is the only podcast we've covered with younger superheroes. So I'm excited for this. I think our plan is to try to do 2 episodes per podcast, maybe 1. I think 2 because I feel like they're kind of slower episodes, so there's not as much to talk about. Um, I'm doing the opening stall right now.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job. Sorry, I should be
No worries.
I
No
should
worries.
be. I should have the social media out here fairly shortly. So, Dave, the thing I've been wanting to ask you, as we always do, at the outset of one of these things, is tell me and tell the listeners a little bit about your experience
Cloak and Dagger.
with Cloak and Dagger and how
Yeah.
you know these characters
Um,
and what you're coming in with. At the start of what is a slightly different presentation of these characters in the television show.
the only thing that I know is I remember seeing clips of them appearing on the recent Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man cartoon series. So I really don't know anything about these characters. This is great for me. It's an intro to who these superheroes are. Because unlike Daredevil and Luke Cage, where I know of them, they've appeared on TV before or some cartoon in some fashion. So Cloak and Dagger, it's really new to me. Very much like the Runaways, although I'm not very much into the Runaways. I think Cloak and Dagger, it's just, I don't know how to explain it, what it is. It's slow like the Netflix TV shows, but interesting enough where I want to see more. Because even though it's not all action, it's very kind of mysterious how everything has been playing out in the first 3 episodes. Um, that said, I really do hope there's a lot more action because I don't know, I just enjoy action. and I feel like this is going to be an interesting show because usually our Netflix shows, usually there's a lot of cameos involved in. I feel like Cloak and Dagger being on Freeform, I don't know. I don't think it can anyhow coincide with any cameos from any other MCU universe. Like how Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is just big on doing that, and the Netflix ones are big on, borrowing other Netflix MCU characters.
Yeah, no. So I've tried to get some other things done over here. But it's interesting. So you and I kind of go back and forth on these shows where there are some where you're really familiar with the characters, and some where I'm really familiar with the characters. I don't know that we've come into either one of them where we've both been coming in on the same plane. Cloak and Dagger for me, although I don't necessarily recall a ton of their lore, but it just so happened that just when I was getting into comics in the mid '80s was when they were having a big revival and got rebooted into a new ongoing, which I read. So it was one of the first ongoing titles that I onboarded with and had in my recurring monthly pull list. And they were so from my recollection and where I'm coming in as far as deltas between what we're seeing on the screen and what I'm more familiar with is. So they were teenagers, but they were older teenagers. They were kind of.
They were? Okay.
Yeah. When I first encountered them, they were kind of. I think they were supposed to be, like just post high school age, and, this was back in the '80s, so it was the whole war on drugs thing. So their whole thing had a very strong drug element to it. And it was in all of the Marvel Knights kind of comics at the time, right? The Punisher, well, of course, the Punisher in the '80s, right? His family wasn't killed by former Spec Ops dude. They were killed, by drug cartel people. Spider-Man, the Spider-Man stories, the Punisher stories, Power Man and Iron Fist stories. All these things had a heavy element of cleaning up drugs in New York. Excuse me. So, and I want to say that was like how they supposedly originally like got their powers, and one of them or maybe both of them had actually been drug users. So, which I think is what we kind of see alluded to with Tandy, where we see her, snorting drugs, which in this case is more of a placebo, because she's not snorting anything illicit or illegal, or maybe they are narcotics, but they're like stuff you can get through prescription. So, but the big thing, I think the big difference here is the other thing is there was no love story, which I understand is where this is going to head.
Oh no!
Yeah, I read that somewhere. That may have been something some entertainment outlet picked up before the show really got started. But there wasn't any of that. They were partners, and I think later, maybe in like the 2000s, Marvel maybe gave them some romantic bend. But the big thing, and the big thing was that Cloak's character was so tragic because he couldn't have any relationships. We're seeing how he's portrayed, and I don't know if he's going to eventually like evolve to become more physically what I was accustomed to. But like when I read him in the comic, like you weren't normally conscious that there was any body underneath the cloak, right? That that inky black darkness, that was like just him. So, and I don't really even know if he was really corporeal underneath the cloak. In the normal way we think of that. But his big thing was he couldn't have any relationships, and he was a very old soul. So when we met him, he was kind of one of these people who was like a 40 or 50-year-old, trapped in a 19-year-old's body. And he had, I want to say he had some type of link to the blackness that he was able to somewhat control. So So yeah, this is a slightly different variation. Although, like I said, they were both young, and I want to say that maybe they had both come through like the same orphanage or something like that. So I'll probably
Now
go.
let me
Yeah, go
ask you
ahead.
this too.
Yeah.
Was it set in New Orleans like it is in the show? Because
No,
I okay, go on.
no, and no, it wasn't. They were definitely New York City kids.
Okay.
And let me ask you about that because I keep getting confused. So it's supposed to be set. Now maybe jumping an episode here. It's supposed to be set in New Orleans, but then when when the dirty cop, the redhead guy, uh, meets the female cop and tell her that the thing with the rich kid has been taken care of and the case is closed. He says to her, "I thought New York only hired the finest."
I think maybe that's a reference, some sort of reference, like maybe.
She's a former New York City cop.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that threw me off. But no, they were definitely firmly set in New York.
Okay, but I love that twist, right? Because you got a little bit of their background is like, it says, hey, this story we've created, and the city they live in has a impact on the story. So I love that.
Yeah. And
It's kind of going.
yeah, I mean, the setting in New Orleans gives it, a very rich historical background.
Yes.
To tell those stories in. So, now that all being said, the problem and concern that I have is, the other heavy thing in the Marvel comic in the '80s was they were runaways. So, I'm I'm waiting to see that. I guess what I don't know, and I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop is I'm assuming that they will be runaways and eventually they will run away to New York.
I think that's clearing up. Yeah.
Okay. Because I don't really know this because this is the difference, right? So the Flash comic didn't really have all the stuff that we see in the TV show, right? There wasn't like a foster parent. There wasn't all the family stuff. And I've accepted that on things like The Flash and Supergirl and Green Arrow, right? I think Cloak and Dagger, at least for me, is something starkly different from that, and I don't want that, right? I don't want a year, really, of them living at home with their parents, because like there were no parents, right, in the 1980s comic. There was no family in the picture. I mean, and really that was very much kind of a very particular edge of the story was that they just had each other.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we've had like 3 episodes of prequels still, and I'm like, okay, when do we get to see more actual Cloak and Dagger?
Well, right. That's my other concern is they haven't really. I don't really want 13 episodes of them learning to use their powers either.
Oh no.
Which sometimes we get, right. So it's good. It's good. The show is good. We characterize some other things like this. We talk about these shows or movies that are just good shows and movies, and even without, like, they would be good shows and movies without the superhero stuff. And normally I'll accept that, but not. I don't know that I'll accept that with this one, right? They need to become what they're supposed to become before the end of the season. And I don't know. I'm not sure how I'm going to feel if they don't put them in the suit. Right? Like I have my whole thing about, like, I despise watching these shows where it takes, a full year for them to put the costume on.
Right, like Daredevil, you didn't get to see his until season 2.
Yeah. But even the bigger thing in that universe, right, is he's the only one with a costume.
Yeah.
And we've kind of accepted that for our first couple seasons, but and I guess I've accepted that that's the way the MCU, that corner of the MCU, will work. I don't know. I don't want to see Dagger running around in blue jeans and a t-shirt. The look of those characters is just very iconic. And it's very much about those costumes and how they come off. will also be interesting to see how they how their environments play out, because another strong motif of the '80s comic was like you didn't see Cloak and Dagger in the daylight, right? They pretty much explicitly operated like at
Yeah.
night. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well.
I feel like for at least this first season, we're probably going to be sticking in New Orleans, though, because of the whole conflict with Tandy's father. And that, again, another secret evil organization, kind of like we had with Danny Rand's organization at first.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about cookies and Easter eggs. So awesome that it's the Roxxon Corporation, right? Like,
Yeah, that's the same one, right? That
yeah,
same,
this is yeah,
right.
and in the comics today, the Roxxon Corporation kind of figures heavily in the Marvel universe. It's kind of become, it's not the new Hydra, but it's a thing, right? So yeah, and what I love about that is, this is the thing that I kind of sometimes say that I feel like these shows and these movies need to do. This whole, I'm going to ignore the fact that I exist in a universe where a bunch of this stuff happens. Like, it was so great to me that they just pulled Roxxon right out first thing off the bat, and I'm like, okay, you've done it. You've firmly instantiated this in the Marvel universe. There's no question that it's all connected. Fine, you don't have to say the words "Shield" or the incident in New York. For Pete's sake, please stop saying the incident in New York. But, because now it happened 10 years ago, right? Now we've got Thanos, right? So it's not like this one mystical event happened and that defines the entire universe. But I appreciate it so much that that they gave that nod to sticking it in the Marvel universe, and are leaning on structures that they have already previously put in place. So I don't know, man. What else? Unfortunately, my notes appear to have been eaten by
No worries.
a particular bug in my Chromebook.
Let's see. I'm trying to think here about. I'm reading just kind of the highlights. So I watched the first two episodes when they first premiered,
Okay.
and also the same time it first premiered, like just shortly after I watched episode 3, and then tonight is episode 4. Oh yeah, that's right. The other thing I was going to say is I do want to see more of Tyrone and Evita, because Evita seems very mysterious, and I feel like there's more to her than meets the eye right now. Like, I feel like she's got a secret she's hiding.
Well, so this is an interesting thing that I was going to bring up with you too. One of the things that I'm very curious about is, so trying to figure out the right way.
Because, like, here's the thing with her. She just randomly appears at the most random times, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how does this girl, like, all of a sudden appear out of nowhere?
Right, and she's got the whole voodoo connection thing.
Yeah.
But, so this is my thing, and so because you had the drug war, the drug war in comic books was kind of like the Soviet Union to the United States in the Cold War, right? You had a defined enemy, you had a big MacGuffin, you had an easy thing to point at and call it evil. Comic books did fine in the 80s with that being the only thing, right? And Cloak and Dagger, from what I remember, and their run didn't last that long. That's always been the problem with these characters. They're these characters where you put them in an ongoing, unfortunately, it doesn't sell huge. Like, there are people who like them, but they like them just to see them showing up in other books. One of my questions is they don't really, from what I remember, they don't really have, like, an arch nemesis, like a villain. Like, the only thing I can remember from that run in the 80s that I read was they were constantly warring against, like drug gangs and cartels and things like that.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting. Yeah, I guess they might have to create a whole brand new villain, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because right now we kind of have that crooked cop who's
Right.
coming up, and the Roxxon Corporation, of course.
Right, although that's a thing that, again, I want them to grow out of, right? what was what was cool for me for Cloak and Dagger is there were obviously very tragic things that had happened in their lives to get them where they were now, but they were covered like in like some exposition and some flashback scenes, right? It wasn't pages dedicated to telling that whole story, and because you didn't know everything about the whole story, that kind of made it more better. I don't,
Yeah.
there was some mystery to it and some things that you just accepted. So, but now we're now we're pulling back the covers on all that, and spending a lot of time doing it. I don't know, so I'm ready for them to move past that as well.
Yeah. What did you think of the episode 3? How they did that? Because it was very much a back to back, and then they intertwined at the very end of the episode.
This was the whole like he took a special bath and she got hit on the head, and they both went on a Vision Quest spirit walk and wound up finding the same things and meeting in the middle. Yeah, I mean it was neat. Our former coworker, Sarah Belmont over at Scene and Nerd, kind of tweeted out the same thing, right? That she felt that was very clever. So yeah, it was neat. But this is where the thing gets weird, and maybe for me, and maybe I'm carrying a lot of baggage. Like I don't get it. Like what is it about their powers that would enable that, right? And maybe that's the thing. Now, the big thing in Cloak and Dagger in the comic was their powers, and I think it was done deliberately when they were created. Their powers were kind of deliberately agnostic in terms of whether they were mutants, chemically or radiologically changed superheroes, or whether it was magic, right? Because the difference with their powers is there are definitely...
Yeah, I feel like they're more magic based, right? At least it seems that way.
I don't... From memory, I don't think they're magic based, but they wind up having mystical impact a lot of times. Like there's a very specific thing about like how Dagger's shots of light impact people who are evil, right? How it decidedly impacts people who are evil differently than other people. So they were always kind of there were these weird in between power sets to me, is kind of the way I see it. So I don't know. Sorry, so now I'm distracted by reading the.
No worries.
Yeah, so this was the heavy thing, right? The heavy drug stuff. Her light daggers also have the capacity to cure certain persons of drug addictions. And can alleviate Cloak's hunger for light, which allows her to avoid becoming overcharged. So that was the thing, right? She would when you were like a drug addict, if you would get hit by one of these light daggers, that's when you would go through like immediately. It's Friday night after a very long week, through like immediate withdrawal, like pains. Your stomach would feel like it was being turned inside out. But then you would be done. You would like no longer be like a cocaine addict or a heroin addict. Yeah, so it's just kind of weird, and go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I overall felt kind of episode 3 was the better episode. I mean, 1 was pretty good just that was the opener, but 2 was kind of like eh. So I think overall I think I don't know how I would rate them, compared to the other Netflix shows yet. I mean, one of the things I like is they're a little bit not so heavily focused on kind of like themes of like, urban violence like you saw in Luke Cage, or post-traumatic stress syndrome as you saw in Punisher. So I like that it's a little bit more lighthearted. I mean, it's
These
not
are
like it's not over focusing on the drug addiction that Tandy has, and it's not over focusing on getting over the death of Tyrone's brother, right? Like it acknowledges this happened in the past. We're not dwelling on our issues, you know.
I don't. I don't. I'm gonna say I don't know that I agree, but I may be reacting very strongly to one thing because there has been no better scene. I will claim there has been no better scene in any. I won't necessarily say the movies. I don't think that there's been a better scene in a Marvel TV show than that scene between Tyrone and his mother. With his mother played by Gloria Rubin, who I believe is a ER alum and has played tons of dramatic roles. One of the things that stands out to me is we had all of this problem with her name.
Oh yeah, that scene where that was powerful, right? Where he says, I feel like I know it's my fault or something.
Well, he said,
like,
yeah. So what he says is, you guys are both smothering me, and I get it, I understand it. You guys are afraid that if I don't do every single thing right, you're going to lose me. And the mom says, and I tweeted some things out while I was watching because I wound up watching these episodes on Father's Day, and of course I have two daughters. So the whole scene with her, both of my daughters take ballet. So all the scenes with Tandy.
Oh no! Gosh, emotional.
Yeah. But then, but then the scene between them, because I mean, I remember similar conversations between my mother and I, right, when I was growing up. Nothing that powerful, but he says, if I know you guys think that if I don't do everything right, that you'll lose me. And she goes, no, I'm worried that if you do everything right, I'm still going to lose you. And that
was powerful.
And it conveys, and I don't know, I related to it from an ethnic perspective. I'm not going to say that anybody who doesn't have that perspective couldn't relate to it, but maybe you access it in a different way. For me, it definitely conveyed that feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that you feel when you're a minority, in a country or in a town where, like, no matter what you do, you don't know if it's going to make things good, right? A lot of what I've been reflecting on as I remember, my relationship with Cloak and Dagger, when I was a kid growing up, there was a piece of that, right? Like I didn't know that I was gonna get out, right, of the little town that I was in. I didn't know that I was gonna get out of the poverty that we lived in, and I didn't know that I was gonna be able to continue to steer clear and not be impacted by the criminal elements and the bad actors that I went to school with in close proximity every single day, right? So there's certain characters in DC and Marvel that I acclimated to, and Cloak and Dagger were one of them, right? Like Cloak and his darkness and his inability to relate to other people, but to also see the world in terms of the evil that surrounded him, and having a desire to always see those wrongdoers punished, right? Those were things I related to, and also the notion of him, like I said, kind of being an old soul, right? Being this 19-year-old, I mean, in real genealogical terms, like having lived on this planet 19 years, but carrying, such a weight that when you read him on the page, he read as like a 38-year-old. So yeah, that's a scene that just kind of took me off my feet. Like I was literally like out of breath when that went down. But that's an indication to me of like the great writing. Like I don't know who's writing this, who they've got for screenwriters and episode writers, but somebody in that group or that group in its mixture and its composition is very real. These don't feel like there are shows and movies and it covers even the superhero movies where you can definitely feel when it's like people who have grown up in like small rural towns or are in suburbia trying to write characters that are very grounded in street, and I mean that by both white and black characters, right? Whatever the makeup of this writers group is, it feels like they get it. It feels very authentic.
No, yeah, I agree. Like the thing I like too is like they don't have as much like scenes that go on over the issue, but when they do have scenes like that are about emotional things, like they're really strong.
Yeah, and that's that success formula, right? That's what.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it was for you, but that's what hooked me to the Flash originally. That's what hooked me to Supergirl out of the gate. It's not the fist flying and the great fight choreography.
It's those moments where the characters relate back to you, right? Because, yeah,
absolutely, yep. Yeah, so
with that, we're kind of wrapping up close to the end.
Okay, yeah. Unfortunately, I'm in the canoe without a paddle a little bit.
I'm half dead right now. I have a long week.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, yeah. So maybe next time we'll be able to go through the episodes in a little deeper detail. Like I said, I'm devoid of my notes, but bang up start. I loved. I guess maybe a couple other things that I might say is.
I feel like, did we cover episode 3 really in this? I know there's supposed to be 1 and 2, but I felt like we just kind of went through 1 and 2 and talked more on 3.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think we've covered 3 because 3 gets much more starts to get into his relationship with Avita. Yeah. We talked a little bit about the Spirit Quest thing.
Yeah. We'll get more into it, yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely get more into it. I mean, we've got a couple days. I might actually watch it again. But the show's good. It feels very grounded.
Yeah.
As much as a superhero show can be. I love the notion of these 2 young kids taking on the Roxxon Corporation potentially. I want to see. I guess it's going to sound sadistic to say, I want to see Tyrone really get twisted up emotionally. Like I want him to become that dark Cloak, right? That guy who's like he's a kid now and he's relating to people and saying things that like when I read him he didn't say, right? He's he wouldn't have a conversation with a woman, right? She would say something to him, and he would just say something tragic, right, and walk away. So we'll see how that goes. It's a good show. Really enjoying it. Here's my big thing that I would say too, man. A few years ago, when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. came on, I was like, if you would have told me when I was, a kid, or even like in my 20s, that we'd be sitting here talking about a show about S.H.I.E.L.D. that got onto television in the first place, but no less than that, like, ran for 4 years, like, I'd have been like, you're nuts. Like, that's like a bureaucratic, like, corner office in the Marvel Universe, right? But the notion that there's a Cloak and Dagger show, and it's popular, and people like, when this show was announced, and it was announced that it was going to be on Freeform, my big concern was, I'm like, because what I've always said is that where the Marvel Universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and maybe superhero movies in general are going to potentially topple is when they start going after characters that are below the threshold, right? When they feel like they've addressed so many of the big characters that they start diving down and touching these characters that really, at best, they should count themselves lucky if they make it onto somebody else's animated series, right? Like, No Way in Hell, they should have a show of their own. I was worried when they hit Cloak and Dagger. I was like, oh, we're starting to go B grade now. And Cloak and Dagger are wonderful characters, but like I said, they've never stuck an ongoing for any extended period of time. I mean, Vibe works in the Arrowverse because he's on somebody else's show. Elongated Man works in the Arrowverse because he's on somebody else's show. They took a bunch of B grade characters and put them on Legends of Tomorrow, and that's the only way they make it because they're all clumped together in a group. So when they did it with this, I was like really concerned that we were starting to jump the shark. It's just flat out flabbergasting and amazing that people are attaching to this, right, in a really kind of fandom way. I almost think more so than the Gifted. Like I feel like people are attached onto the Gifted because they're X-Men people.
Yeah, right. And like Polaris, you know, she's kind of
right.
She's a B grade character, but they've kind of highlighted her.
Yeah. Currently a good guy in the Marvel Universe, by the way. I just read a couple issues ago. Currently kind of leading the X-Men, so it kind of cracks me up. It's comic books, right? So
yeah,
what's going on in the show is the complete opposite of what's going on in the comics right now.
Yeah, no, I feel like I like the Gifted, and I think I like Cloak and Dagger, and I hate to say it, but I don't know, just I'm kind of lost on the Netflix right now. It's just I don't know. It's just I don't know how to say it, but it's like I felt like the drama was too intense and there wasn't enough action. Like I feel like the whole screenwriting and the fact that like there's a mystery and there's some drama, like there's a little bit of everything going on in Cloak and Dagger. And so it feels like Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Daredevil are all kind of on the same formula, whereas Cloak and Dagger is a new formula, which is what I felt with the Gifted was too. It was a very new formula.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that. The Netflix shows, it's kind of weird. It feels like, and I don't know why it would be like this, it feels like there's constrained budgets, so there's less superhero-y stuff. But I'm like, you guys are Netflix. Like, you've got billions of dollars to spend. So I don't know if it's a creative choice, if they're bringing in people that are like, well, I want to ground the story and make it about, you know, humans and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but you can't, I don't know that you can do that forever, right? Look at say what you will about the CW shows. Arrow is a very character-driven story, and it's very much about the people, and it digs way down deep into feelings. I don't think you can say that you're ever bored with the action in an episode of Arrow, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. So I feel like they got to get over that. If they're gonna do season after season after season of these Netflix shows, they can't all be slow burn. There's no damn excuse for it being a slow burn when it's season 2, right? Like, and I feel like we still got a lot of slow burn with I like Jessica Jones season 2, I think, better than a lot of people in our circles did. And maybe I was still kind of glowing off of, you know, having watched season 1 fairly recently, since I, like, waited a couple years before I watched it. But we still got a lot of slow burn in that season to get to where we were trying to go. A lot of just, like, talking head scenes with no punches being thrown.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I agree with you. We should probably go ahead and get out of here.
All right, man.
Conserve our energy for
Sunday.
For Sunday. So thanks once again for everybody for joining in on another episode of It's Another Thing, episode number 5. We are covering Jessica Jones. I think that's going to wind up maybe being all that we cover this summer. We'll see what short format series pops up after Cloak and Dagger. If I just said we're covering Jessica Jones, I apologize. That was an error. But we'll be covering Cloak and Dagger, and we'll see if we'll cover anything else this summer. Otherwise, I guess, you know, once this is done, we'll be back for The Gifted sometime in September or October. So thanks once again for everybody for joining in. Once again, on behalf of the E2KG Network and Dave Pecci, my name is Gasically Stamen.
All right, sorry guys. Looks like Agisicles cut out, but that's it, and we'll see you again for our next show.
Deselect. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure what happened, but Dave took us out, and he has bounced. So thanks once again for joining in on this episode of It's Another Thing, episode number 5. Please feel free to head over to our YouTube channel, E2KG Network, on YouTube, and like this episode or a couple of other episodes, and subscribe to the channel, so that way you will get alerted when we have an episode posted. Thanks once again. That's going to do it for me and for us. We are out of here.